Okay, now that we've mastered the sine-sine phenomenon, let's take another look at how to read expressions once we've eliminated the sine-sine phenomenon in a way that will be the basis for how we add and subtract integers in terms of the way that I teach it. So let's take a look here. I'll do this by example as to not ramble too much, I hope. Okay, in number one where it says 4 plus 6, well the 4 is got a little plus sign that we don't really write there. Okay, so I would tend to think I see two of the same sign when I look at that, so that would be the same problem. In number two, very quickly I have what looks like a negative and a minus, but they look very similar. Okay, so I think that's going to be a same sign problem. It's a very visual thing we're trying to adapt here. In number three, there's a plus there for the 7 that's not written, and then there's a minus in front of the 12. Okay, so I would call them different. And number 4, although it's one of each, it's a little more obvious because there's not anything missing in terms of the signs. It kind of sticks right out at you. I would call that different as well. Now in 5 and 6, looks like somebody snuck in a couple of sign problems here. So if we saw that, minus a negative is lose something bad, which is good, making the 5 positive and the 9 positive. So I would say that that's really a same expression where they're same signs. And then you have in 8 plus negative 4, it sounds like you're getting something, excuse me, sounds like you're getting something bad, which is subtraction. And there's a positive 8 there. And I would call them different because the sign in front of the 4 that I see is a minus. Again, this is a very visual process. We really try and let our eyes do the work here and look for two of the same symbol or two different symbols. Also, keeping an eye out for sometimes when there's a lead positive not written in expressions that don't require it written. You don't have to write the positive sign. Okay, so let's continue to explore and see how this goes. Okay, let's take a look at these problems 1 and 2, and we're going to look at problems that have the same sign. If you notice, again, that's going to be a positive 2, and then it says a plus sign with the 4, and that's a positive 1 and a plus sign for the 5. So real basically here, the first problem is 2 plus 4. Okay? So I'm going to start at 2, and then I'm going to add 4, which is 1 right, 2 right, 3 right, 4 right. Okay, well, there should be no shock there that the answer was 6. Okay? Similarly, when I start at 1 and add 5, I'm going to go to my right, excuse me, plus 1, plus 2, plus 3, plus 4, plus 5. And that's no shock that I get 6. Okay? Now, this is not really too much of a shock, and it's hard to see the pattern because it's so easy. So I'm going to go on to a similar type of problem where there's same signs, but there's two negative signs. Okay? Well, it looks like there's two negatives. It's really a negative and a minus, but again, if you just visually use this trick, it might be a help. So the first problem says to start at negative 4. And we're going to subtract 3, which means go 3 to the left. So minus 1, minus 2, minus 3. Okay. I guess by the number line it makes sense that we're getting a negative 7. Okay. Now let's take a look here on this next problem where I'm going to start at negative 1 and subtract 6. Okay. Which means go to your left 6, so it's minus 1, minus 2, minus 3, minus 4, minus 5, minus 6. Okay, and that's -7 as well. Okay, now let's see here. There's something about this that I want you to see, and it's the pattern if you notice. When we hear same, we want to think sum, okay? This will help be the trick to help you compute this quickly. Okay, so if I look at the same, that there's two minus signs, but then just look at the number, just ignore the signs for a second. Well, the 4 and the 3 give me the 7 when I sum them, and I have two negatives, so I'll keep it negative. So I did a sum there even though it said subtract if I just looked at the numbers. If you notice that works here too. You have same signs, so do the sum of 1 and 6, which is 7, and keep the sign. Okay? Let's go back to those really easy problems. Well, that rule works here for same. Think sum. Okay, what's the sum of 2 and 4? It's 6, and keep the sign, which is positive. Trick that's going to work every time. Same thing here. I got two of the same. The 1 is a positive, and there's a positive in front of that 5. So I'm going to add the 1 and 5 and get 6, and then I'm going to keep the positive, which, again, I don't have to write here because I don't say positive 6 as an answer. I could just say 6. The positive is understood. So that is kind of the gist of when you have the same sign. What it becomes, excuse me, I'll write here. It becomes same. When you see the same, it's two steps. It's add the numbers, and two, keep the sign, which means if you started with two negatives that were the same, you keep it negative. You started with two positives that were the same, you keep it positive. Okay, now let's go on to where there's going to be different signs. Let me just find my right slide here. Okay, and let's take a look. Okay, so in blue here, it says -7 plus 3. So I'm going to start at -7 with this blue arrow and do plus 3. Plus 1, plus 2, plus 3, which takes me to the right, which is -4. Okay, and we'll look for a pattern in a minute. Okay, let's now go to the red problem, which says to start at 6 and subtract 8. So I'm going to go 8 to my left. -1, -2, -3, -4, -5, -6, -7, -8. Okay, and that gives me -2. Okay, I'm not going to look for the pattern just yet. Maybe you've seen it. Maybe it's jumped out at you, but let's continue on. Okay, let's look at our green problem here, number 3, which is -2 plus 5. Well, excuse me, I just gotta switch my arrows here. My green one starts at -2. So I'm gonna add 5, okay, which means to go 5 to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm adding, which because I'm going right, I'm adding positives. So it makes sense. You should know that. And I get a 3 here. Okay? And now for this last purple problem, number 4, it says start at 7 and go 2 to the left because I'm subtracting 2. So I start at 7, I go -1, -2. Okay, so now I don't expect you to rip out a number line when we do this. I wanted to, reinforce that I'm definitely getting the right answers before we start to talk about a pattern. Okay, so I think everybody agrees that these answers are correct. Okay, now let's talk about how we got them. Okay. Well, when we talk about different signs, let's actually use that word different and turn it into difference. which means to subtract. Okay, that word before for same, we tried to think sum. So now that we have different, we try and think difference or subtract. Okay, let's maybe see like if there's any relationship here. Well, if you notice in number one, if I just look at the numbers, 7 and 3, and do the difference, I would get the 4. Well, that's cool. Well then, how is it I know that it's going to be -4 though? Well, the 7's the bigger number, so you use its sign. So let's see if that works again. Okay, let's go over here to this red problem. Well, I have 6 and 8 with different signs. So I'm going to do their difference. Now, you always want to do the bigger one first for mental quickness, and do 8 minus 6 is 2. And again, I called it -2 because the 8 is bigger and its sign is negative. Okay? So now look into the green problem. It's obvious I have different signs. So if I just look at the numbers, ignoring the signs again, I have 5 and 2, and that's giving me 3 when I do the difference. And then I can sit there and say, well, the 5 is the bigger number, and it has a positive. So the answer is positive. So into the purple problem, I look at 7 minus 2 very quickly. It's obviously 5. But let's actually use our rule here and see. Well, okay, 7 has a little positive sign that's not written right here. And then there's a negative in front of the 2. Okay? So that means they're different. So I'm going to do the difference of 7 and 2. And that's going to get me 5. And then I look and say, well, which one's bigger, 7 or 2? Well, the 7 is. And what's its sign in front? Positive. So the answer is positive. Okay, now going back to my rules slide, when you have different signs, it's not add. It makes sense if same is add, that different should be the opposite, which be subtract. The numbers, and when I say that with emphasis, I mean you're supposed to ignore the signs. It's like they're not even there. The formal way to do it is think of the absolute value. Okay, I'm sorry, this is step 1 here. I don't know what I was thinking. Okay, then step 2 is use bigger numbers sign. So that's it in a nutshell. Okay, I'll do 2 examples real quickly to flush that out and use those rules. Okay, so if we notice here, if I just had a problem, maybe -8 minus 4, I would see very quickly that if I just try and use my same different rule, I see the same sign twice. So I'm going to take my 8 and my 4 and add them, same as sum. And then I keep whatever sign I started with, which was negative. You can check that on your calculator. -8 minus 4 is -12. So now if I had -9 plus 2, I could see very quickly, okay, they are different signs. So if I look just at the numbers, 9 and 2, and do their difference, I would get 7. And then whichever one is bigger, in this case it's the 9, I would use the sign in front of it and get -7. You could check that on your calculator that -9 plus 2 is -7.